And there we go. So welcome everyone. My name is Lisa Bontemps. I'm the project manager from Westwood for All Ages in Westwood, New Jersey. And I'm here with my colleagues today, Carlos Herrera from the City of Elizabeth and Kathy Viola from Garfield. And we're going to be leading this panel today on food insecurity, particularly in light of the COVID-19 crisis and what that meant for our older adults. So just again, as a reminder to keep yourselves muted during this participation. We will have a chance for Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions, just as in the previous session, be sure to type them in the chat feature, and we will monitor them as we go along. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just so that we have a good understanding of what food insecurity refers to, we have a little bit of a definition here from the USDA. And they look at food insecurity as an issue of access to sufficient food that would enable someone to enjoy adequate nutrition for optimal health purposes. So the key concept here is quality and diversity of food groups, so as to ensure proper overall nutrition. We can contrast that with the concept of hunger, which is strictly speaking a physical state of not having enough food and therefore experiencing some of the immediate consequences to one's health. So it is possible to be food insecure, but not hungry necessarily, because one might be living on a diet of, let's say, highly processed foods, or perhaps living in a food desert where access to good quality nutrition is lacking. Here in New Jersey, it's estimated that nearly 14% of our older residents are food insecure. And on a national level, Feeding America, which is a food relief organization, estimates that nearly 2/3 of senior households that they serve are often forced to choose between food and medical care. So as you can imagine, lack of adequate nutrition due to economic hardships that are often faced by our older population then results in a higher utilization rate of medical care. And with that comes the out-of-pocket expenses not covered by Medicare, which in turn leaves even less money for people to spend on good nutrition. So it becomes this vicious cycle that's only exacerbated by, for many people during this pandemic. And it's led to many food banks and pantry organizations scrambling to help meet some of those increasing needs. So I think many of you can relate to this. When the lockdowns took place in most of the states in mid-March, older residents were hit particularly harder right away because it was immediately apparent that they were the more vulnerable population to COVID-19 and were therefore needing to remain at home and socially isolate even more so than younger people. So as you might remember, if you went to the stores right after March 13th, many things were out of stock, not just toilet paper. But it was apparent that there was a huge run on all kinds of grocery items, food, paper goods, cleaning products, leaving many shelves wiped clean. Along with this were issues with supply chain problems that made it difficult for grocery stores and other retailers to adequately restock for weeks and in some cases months. I mean, even now you might find it difficult or nearly impossible to purchase Clorox wipes or Lysol spray. So most grocery store chains have been used to offering delivery services, particularly for a lot of older residents who don't have mobility. But this too was quickly stymied by the overwhelming demand. So in some of the conversations I had with many of our older residents, they were being told by grocery stores that there was a wait of 3 to 5 weeks before they could receive any kind of delivery of food. So clearly we were in a crisis situation. And that is when our age-friendly coalition partners sprung into action, partnering with food relief organizations, local Meals on Wheels organizations, county and local government leaders, community centers, volunteer civic groups, and more, to galvanize resources and meet the food needs of their older populations. So you see here just a few examples of our age-friendly communities in northern New Jersey doing the work of helping to provide food relief by way of fresh foods, pantry stables, toiletries, and more, and in all different settings, both indoor and out, to get food to our older residents. Because this is about partnerships, we're going to be sharing what we did along with other community partners, but these are just some examples of things that were undertaken. We were connecting people to relative services related to food. working with food pantries, setting up food donations, in some cases establishing pop-up distributions, engaging volunteers to do grocery shopping, deliveries, mapping out where food could be located. Even restaurants, some of our communities were purchasing gift cards to local restaurants who were also hit very hard because obviously restaurants had to close their doors, but many were offering delivery or pickup or takeout services. And what we found is that many restaurants also were able to provide not just cooked hot meals, but the raw ingredients of food items for people that they were able to acquire from their wholesalers. So we got a little creative in working with them to get food out to seniors. And all of this was possible because of partnerships with many different organizations. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first presenter, Carlos Herrera, who will speak to us about the efforts that were undertaken in the city of Elizabeth.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So my name is Carlos Herrera. I am the Assistant Project Manager for Lifelong Elizabeth. I work alongside co-project managers Jill Dispenza and Margaret Church. And to give you some background information on Elizabeth, Elizabeth is the 4th largest city in New Jersey, behind only Paterson, Jersey City, and Newark. So we have about 129,000 residents. We take up 13.6, or about 14 square miles of area. We're a majority city with about 65% identifying as Hispanic, 55% identifying as other than white. And while it is a majority Spanish-speaking city, there are pockets of different communities. So it's a very diverse town. So we have Haitian communities, we have African-American sections, Portuguese sections, Syrian, but majority South American immigrants here residing in the city. So older adults, about 10% are above 65 or 65 and over, and about 22,000, or let's say 17, 18% are above 55. And all this information is from the census. So just to give you an idea of what kind of city we're working in to bring age-friendly community initiatives to such a diverse community. So there are specific challenges to it, but overall we see that there's a lot of need in the city. So I want to start off with the efforts we were doing on food insecurity in Elizabeth. And a big part of it was being involved with Shaping Elizabeth. It's a coalition in Elizabeth. It's not as active now due to COVID, but it was a coalition that brought people from all sectors to kind of focus on health within the city and health outcomes. So we're talking government, we're talking schools, nonprofits, all kinds of even businesses together to focus on school. So because of our involvement, we created a food provider and transit map with suggestions from the Food Pantry Coalition that they had, which mapped out food providers throughout the city and transportation routes. We brought presentations to older adults, mainly at senior centers and housing authority buildings. And an idea sprung up within our own coalition to kind of make this an app. So we're working with Policy Map to kind of create an online version of this paper map that we had so that people can use it online and find resources more quickly. And then COVID hit. The pandemic hit, and we were kind of forced to swivel our efforts because we couldn't go out in the community as much. So we can go to the next slide. And with that, we receive a very generous donation from the Grata Fund, who actually funds our Lifelong Elizabeth initiative. And it was to create an emergency food package delivery program, as well as grocery shopping assistance for older adults who did not want to go to grocery stores and put themselves at risk. The agency received referrals from people calling into the agency saying, I need food. And to give also a little background, Jewish Family Service, which is the recipient of the grant from the Grata Fund to create Lifelong Elizabeth, covers all of Union County. So we're talking 22 cities within a large span of New Jersey. And so there's people maybe in other cities, not from Elizabeth, that need food. So since they can't make it, or they're lost their job, they don't have access to food, we created this program to meet those needs and especially help older adults in our community. Clients call into our agency, request food, or they're referred by community referrals. So another area where partnerships comes in. Our partner organizations and our Lifelong Elizabeth Coalition would reach out to us, say, we have families or we have a list of people. I'm thinking what specific organization or housing complex, Westminster Heights, that would send us a list of 10 people a week or 10 families a week. So we're talking 30, 40 people being served every week. That's where the partnership comes in, kind of knowing where to go to for all of this. The volunteers, they were from our internal volunteer organization and also community referrals for volunteers that would receive masks, would receive gloves in order to pick up the food here at our agency and deliver it to the homes of the people in need. So by the numbers, and this is about like a month ago, I believe we gave these numbers. But just in the short amount of time that we had this funding from the Grata Fund to create this program, we had more than 260 families served, more than 590 individuals, more than 210 seniors, and more than 200 children. So with all this, over 330 emergency food packages were delivered and counting. I believe even since from the time I gave these numbers, we might have even increased by like another 100 food packages delivered in a month. So this is, we saw that this was a service that was very needed in the community, especially for our older adults. It took an effort of just brainstorming within our own coalition to find the best way to get food and to reach out to people who needed food. There was a lot of marketing to partner organizations so that they can tell their members. And just in general, Jewish Family Service also provides many other services. So if you can zoom into his infographic, or you can see it from your screen, we also provide home care services. We provided an increase in kosher Meals on Wheels deliveries, counseling, definitely a big service needed during this time. So pivoting towards COVID, thankfully we were in a good position as an agency to bring the services that were needed during this time. And Lifelong Elizabeth, we had built up this coalition of partners and people involved with age-friendly and bringing the spotlight to older adult issues and awareness for those issues. We had used that network to kind of seek out families and older adults who needed emergency food services.
So hello, I'm Kathy Viola. I am the Garfield Prevention Coalition, part of the Generations for Garfield team. And Garfield is a little smaller than Elizabeth. It's a city. It's one of 3 cities of the 71 communities in Bergen County. It's an urban suburban. We have a population of approximately 32,000 people in 2 square miles. It's a 7-story senior building that's run by the Garfield Housing Authority. 10% of the population lives below the poverty line, and of that, 17% are over the age of 65. 13% of the general population is over 65, and 10% of the households have someone living alone. Many of our families are newly arrived from Latin-speaking countries, and we have a very large Polish and Eastern European population. There's also many families that have been there for multiple generations. So Garfield is an interesting community. It's very close-knit. The picture on the right here happens to throw 3 generations of volunteers, grandmother, son, and grandson. So next slide. So before COVID-19 hit, we were doing a lot of things. We were partnered with this Community Food Bank of New Jersey for a once-a-month produce market. So they were already our collaborative partners, serving 500 adults a month, and 28% of those were older adults. And COVID hit, and Garfield was extremely hit. Our first pandemic and farmers market that we had as a part of that was as early as March 18th. By the end of April, we had 85 cases, and for the first 3 months of the pandemic, Garfield was in the top 3 in the county with the number of cases. And that included being there with Teaneck, which housed the hospital, which had the most cases. So we had a very high level. It's still around 900 that we've had in the city. It has tapered off, and there's been a couple of weeks with no new cases, so that's good. But we realized then how many of our seniors were living in isolation and had poor access to food. We had noticed that with the monthly food market. So we went into action. So next slide. So being led by our Generations for Garfield team leader, Sergeant Jeff Stewart of the Garfield PD Community Affairs Division, he immediately created a pop-up market on March 18th with the Community Food Bank. They sent us 7 pallets that each contained 200 non-perishable food boxes. So we were able to use that over a 3-week period distributing food. The next food partner that came to us was Table to Table. And working with them, they actually changed their business model to be able to do this because they hadn't done this type of work before. So they provide us food that comes from their various restaurants and sources. And with the volunteers, we package it into smaller packages and distribute it through no contact delivery. With these partners, and Hackensack Meridian came along, and with the Common Market out of Pennsylvania, provided fresh produce in a box, already boxed, neat and easy to handle. So some of our food comes prepackaged, or some of it comes on very large pallets that we have to break down and put into manageable packets. And we have volunteers to do that. One of the most exciting things is through our no contact drive-through delivery is the city of Garfield popped up 2 new very active organizations. One being Garfield Neighbors. It was Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And then we have another group called Strangers Helping Strangers that have created a workforce of nearly 100 volunteers across the age span to help put these markets together. So it's also provided them with a sense of socialization, a sense of activity, and it's connected them to the community in a way they hadn't been connected before. Even seeing the same people come 3 times a week for these food deliveries has allowed us to make connections. Hey, how you doing? How you feeling this week? And checking on one another. So it really has been a wonderful community effort bringing the city of Garfield together in many different avenues, and quite a nice ripple effect. So the next slide, please. So this is some of the ways the food has come in. We've gotten packages of milk that are easy to deliver. We've gotten the lovely boxes on the lower left-hand corner that come from the farmers' produce in Pennsylvania. And they even come with a note from what farms this came from and a little bit about the farm. You can see some of them. The white bags in the center, that means we've gotten pallets after pallets after pallets and have had to repackage them so we can hand them in the drive-through distribution. We have intergenerational volunteers. The volunteers that have helped have been from 17 to 75, and there was a Girl Scout troop that came along. So really what this is, next slide, is collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Ask. People are really willing to help if you ask. They want to be needed. So this is the list of the community partners, and we couldn't do it without them. Most especially our lead Sergeant Stewart, who is the heart and soul of this effort, and the volunteers that come from Strangers Helping Strangers and Garfield Neighbors that make it a vibrant, viable activity. And just on a high note, as of last week, we have delivered over 65,000 meals to residents in Garfield since March 18th. We've even gotten a new container delivered for short-term storage that last week had electricity applied to it, so we can use it for short-term storage. So thank you to our partners, and partnership is the key to all of this. It takes a village, and our village has grown stronger. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. That was very inspiring. So I am going to be talking about the efforts that were undertaken in the borough of Westwood, New Jersey. And just by way of context, we are the smallest of the age-friendly communities in New Jersey, with a population of just a little over 11,000 people in a 2.5 square mile parcel of land. We are not as diverse as the previous 2 communities that you were introduced to. We are primarily middle class suburban, mostly white, with a small Hispanic and Black population and Asian population, but we're primarily white in terms of numbers. Within Bergen County, Westwood is ranked 39 out of 70 municipalities for population size. But 17.5% of our population is 65 or older, which is actually larger than the state of 14.4%, and even the county, which is 15.7%. So we tend to trend a little bit higher as far as our older population goes. Westwood for All Ages is an initiative of Meals on Wheels North Jersey that is funded by our conference co-sponsors, the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation, since about mid-2015. In early 2019, Westwood was also accepted into the WHO AARP network of livable communities because of the age-friendly work that we've undertaken in partnership with the municipal government and other local nonprofit, civic, and business partners. When the lockdown first went into effect here on March 13th, we were contacted by the director of our local nonprofit senior center that's housed in a HUD Section 8 subsidized senior housing complex. And we were asked to help get the word out that they were establishing an emergency food pantry on site in order to allow their residents to be able to safely shelter in place and not have to leave the building to buy food and provisions. Because our Westwood for All Ages initiative has a rather large email list and good social media following and some financial resources to assist in purchasing some emergency food supplies, we were able to assist right away in getting a large influx of non-perishable food donations, as well as paper bags, which were needed to help bag up and deliver the supplies to the residents who were in need. Because we still really didn't know much about this virus other than that it was highly contagious, all the items that came in were sanitized with a bleach water solution and then only handled with gloves until they were distributed to the residents, both in this complex in Westwood as well as a similar sized Section 8 complex in Hillsdale that's also run by the same management company. Additionally, seniors who were used to receiving hot lunches as part of their senior center's congregate lunch program were now receiving weekly deliveries of prepared 5 frozen meals, along with fruit, milk, and bread provided by Bergen County. This pantry stayed in effect, serving its residents in need until it was safe for them to go about tending to their own shopping needs sometime in the early summer. Another effort to provide food to not just our seniors, but really anyone in our local community who might be experiencing food insecurity, due to job layoffs, for instance, was the establishment of a new food pantry that I was able to initiate with the help of a few key partners in Westwood, namely a local couple, David and Roe Mendez, who created their own nonprofit corporation, Connects for NPO, which they established as a food rescue organization that was picking up food donated from Trader Joe's that was deemed unsellable, either due to perhaps damaged packaging or being close to the sell-by date, some overstock, stale bread, and so on. And then they would distribute that food at first literally from their backyard and inviting anybody to come and get food. So wearing both my age-friendly hat as well as that as an elder of a local church that's located right in the center of town, I offered to establish a pop-up food pantry utilizing the food that they were rescuing to be able to make it more central and more accessible to people and to be run by more volunteers. So the attendance at these events varied from week to week with an average of about, I would say, 65 people showing up to feed an average of about 250 people in their homes, many of whom were living in multi-generation households. We were also able to provide delivery of these foods that we rescued to older residents who weren't able to come out and stand in line to receive food. So we did deliveries for them. The original goal was to do this as a weekly event as long as we had sufficient manpower, volunteers, and as long as the demand was there. As of this month, these food pantries at this church are now being offered monthly. However, other churches, because of the cooperation we have with our clergy council, have joined in the partnership with Connects for NPO and are doing weekly or monthly events on different days and times. So we're kind of staggering them so that those in need now have a variety of options locally for receiving food on a weekly basis. And I'd just like to emphasize that the majority of the food that's being distributed is fresh produce, but we also have breads, meats, and to a lesser degree, dairy items. So people are being sent home with quality, nutritionally dense food. I'll also mention here that Connects 4 NPO also connected with and is providing fresh foods at emergency pantries elsewhere throughout the Bergen County area, as well as to the affordable senior housing complex I mentioned in the previous slide. So while they were initially only able to provide the residents of that housing complex with non-perishables, later they were able to include an assortment of fresh fruits and vegetables as well. Meals on Wheels of North Jersey, the grantee for Westwood for All Ages, was also forced to very quickly pivot their operations from delivering daily hot meals prepared by a local long-term care facility to its customers to instead providing 5 days worth of prepared frozen meals that were provided by an alternate caterer. And of course, instead of being able to deliver foods into people's homes or having any kind of close contact with their customers, the volunteers were now required to leave the food at their front door and maintain a safe distance once the customers opened their doors. And the operations for Meals on Wheels was able to resume back to their normal daily deliveries in, I believe it was in mid-July. And so we were able to, continue to serve people in their homes, but again, had to do a little quick pivoting. So to sort of summarize what we've presented today, I think it's clear that partnerships and collaborations are vital. We wouldn't have been able to deliver the volume of food in any of our communities that we did had we not relied on strong partnerships with other food rescue organizations, community organizations, religious organizations, and so on. And to be able to do this, we really do need to be nimble and pivot quickly. You just never know when a crisis is going to erupt. And I think that we were able to kind of quickly step up, and but it also required a lot of patience, it required a lot of flexibility, and it required a lot of creative thinking outside the box. You know, there's that old saying that many hands make light work. We can't underscore enough the power of volunteerism, engaging people in your communities and looking in some of the most unlikely places. We can sort of go to things like scouts to help volunteer, or to existing civic places, but sometimes it's just getting the word out on social media, through online bulletin boards and word of mouth to get volunteers. Look for ways to get food donations in creative manners. You just never know who might be stepping forward. We discovered here in Westwood that there were individuals who just wanted to help. They wanted to be able to do something. And just finding a local couple who decided to start their own food rescue organization because they saw a need, and being able to partner with them was really critical for this movement. Don't be afraid to ask for what's needed. You know, there's that old saying, if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. And sometimes you might have to ask again. So ask your civic leaders, ask your municipal governing body, ask for help, whether it's physical help, word of mouth help, financial help. And we discovered, I think all of us discovered, that utilizing multiple methods of communication for outreach was critical. If you have a good email list, sending out emails to let people know what's going on and to ask for help. Social media can be very powerful. Local newspapers can be a good source for communication as well. Each community is different. As you saw in our presentation, Elizabeth, Garfield, Westwood, vastly different demographically and size-wise. The important thing is know your own particular community. What resources already exist that you can tap into? You might not have to recreate the wheel and establish something from scratch, but if you can link arms with an organization already doing food sharing and food rescuing or food delivery, then that's going to help you be more impactful. And then last but not least is to just persevere, because we're in the midst of a pandemic that we don't know how much longer is going to last. We don't know what the, quote, new normal is going to be. And so we, taking some of this advice of being able to quickly pivot, to make new partnerships, to stay in the know, and to ask for what's needed, all require the trait of perseverance. So with that, I will share our last slide. If you have questions of any of our presenters today, here is the contact information. We are recording this, so this is going to be shared with the larger group as well. And with that, I will open it up for any questions that you might have. I'm just checking to see if we have anything in the chat. And because we're a relatively small group, we're only 17, I would invite you as well to, instead of doing chat, if you'd rather, you can unmute yourselves and simply ask a question or share any feedback. And I'll also want to just introduce too that one of our attendees here, Lisa McClements, who's the age-friendly coordinator for Fairlawn, also works for Meals on Wheels of North Jersey. So she could answer any questions you might have about how Meals on Wheels was able to pivot during this time. I'm going to stop the share. Okay. And I see in the chat that we have one. Give me one moment here to kind of read what we've got. So I would just like to put out a question to some of you who work in Age Friendly. Are there things that you have been doing in your own communities to address the need of food insecurity that you can share with the larger group as well, so we can sort of learn from each other?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
And I want to, so Kathy, you mentioned that there was a large like Latinx and Eastern European population in Garfield. Are there organizations you're partnered with that specifically tap into those groups and, you know, are good for kind of getting more information about working with them?
I seem to be having a power outage here a little bit, but so I hope I can continue. The lights are flicking. But yes, the newly formed group, Garfield Neighbors, came out of that community. So they were one of the strong partners. They also helped spread the message, and we spread the message through Facebook posts. These were, the food pantry deliveries were never pre-advertised. It was just on the Facebook page 10 minutes before they'd post the food is here, and we would have lines of 500 cars lined up to pick up food. So there we had volunteers from all the different communities in Garfield. So if somebody needed language help, we were able to help them as they drove through. We were able to do add-on services like promoting the census and other activities. Organizations would hand out senior newsletters to the seniors and things like that. So it provided an opportunity to provide fresh food, provide connections to the community, and people seeing people that they knew volunteering and helping. I hope that helps you. There are several churches that go along with that provided volunteers and sometimes would provide excess food, or we would send it to their pantries. And some of them also became the volunteer drivers for those that were not able to get to the drive-through delivery. We had delivery services to them. Matter of fact, when one of the volunteers left, the mayor came and started the food deliveries also.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just add too that, you know, churches also had to pivot during this time. Many of them immediately, when the pandemic struck, couldn't meet in person and were doing their services online. But they were still looking for ways to connect with their parishioners and keep their community engaged. And doing food rescues was a good way for the churches to continue to keep their own congregations engaged in their ministry work. They have their own forms of communication for outreach. Many of the older residents in our community go to church, and so they were impacted quite severely by this and weren't able to attend religious services anymore, but they were still being connected with through their priests or their ministers. And so one of the best, most effective ways we had of getting the word out to those people in need was through our local clergy council and what they were able to spread out to their parishioners. And it was also a great way to get volunteers. And as it turns out, now all the food banks in our community are being run out of the churches. So it's consistent with their mission, but and they all have the space to do it. So it made logical sense to partner with them for this particular type of outreach.
Lisa.
Yes.
So I also wanted to just mention that one of the very helpful partnerships that we had here at Meals on Wheels we're actually with some school groups just prior to the pandemic and coming out of winter, I guess the very tail end of winter. What we normally do is we also deliver what we call blizzard boxes. We have some that are purchased through an organization that sponsors them. And a blizzard box is basically a food kit that has 5 days worth of shelf-stable meals that we deliver every probably November to each of our clients free of charge. That just is that little bit of security that they have meals just in case the weather gets too severe to the point where we cannot send our volunteers out on the road safely. So we know that our clients at least have 5 days worth of meals in the back of their pantry that we instruct them to kind of just forget about until the days that they're needed. So in addition to these meals being sponsored, we also have a lot of youth groups that do this as projects. We had a middle school in Washington Township that put anywhere between 50 and 100 of these boxes together. You know, they get a group of these kids, they spread the word, they get shoe boxes, they fill them with cans of shelf-stable meals, and that kind of stuff is what really bought us some time while we figured out how we were going to pivot this business. You know, how were we going to switch from 5 days a week fresh hot meals to providing a week's worth of frozen meals in one shot. And the reason we switched to deliveries once a week was really to keep our volunteers safe and our clients safe. We wanted to limit the exposure, but just the partnerships, just as little, you know, the small ones like a youth group who spent probably, you know, a month putting these blizzard boxes together, turned out to be a huge component in our ability to switch over and to react as quickly as we did. So I would never discount any organization being too small to contribute their resources, because when something like this happens, that was probably one of the more important things that we had in our back pocket, because we enlisted the help of a local youth group. So it was wonderful. And I just wanted to share that, because reach out to those youth groups, because they are so willing to help.
That's a great example, Lisa, of how you can have volunteers from sometimes the unlikely sources as well as the likely ones. And it's a good intergenerational effort as well to connect seniors with younger people as well. I know that also a couple of our restaurants in Westwood were able to provide hot meals. One of them was providing them originally for healthcare workers at our local hospital. As all of you might remember, when the pandemic hit, emergency rooms were slammed very hard, and there was a big effort underway from many restaurants to provide meals to these workers, these first line emergency workers. But there was excess, so they at some point they started making a little more, giving the excess to Meals on Wheels to be able to deliver a nice hot pasta and meatball dinner in some cases to some of our older residents, and some of those were also shared with the food pantry effort that was being run out of the local church that we spearheaded. So
yeah, we also had a local restaurant that actually took over the meals for one day a week. So every Thursday, instead of us we still delivered the meals, but we were able to, we still provided our 5 days, but a local restaurant also gave a fresh meal on Thursday. So it kind of broke it up. Our clients weren't getting, 5 days of the frozen. They actually had a fresh meal in there, and the extra one provided some coverage for the weekend. And there's still another restaurant in town that'll take a weekend order for our clients, and we provide volunteers to deliver that. And that's not offered at a cost to our clients, we are providing that for them with a partnership with the restaurant. So we're trying our best to make sure, you know, everybody's covered on any day that they need. But yeah,
So,
the partnerships are in unlikely places.
And that came from having an established relationship already with these restaurants.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you know your community, know who you're in there with, establish relationships from, you know, all walks to be able to do that.
Yeah. They actually were, the restaurants were allowing us to use their walk-in freezers to store all of our frozen meals. And they saw us, you know, I won't say struggling, but, you know, they saw us dealing with this challenging time. And they said, you know what else can we do? You know, sure, we can let you borrow our freezer space, but is there something else that we can do? And you have to be ready to say, yep, you can help me with this, this, and this. And they do. And they do.
Exactly. Thank you. Are there any other questions? We're just up at 11:30, so we'll be ending in a couple of minutes. Unless there are any other questions or comments, or anybody would like to share anything that they've been doing in their communities that we can all learn from, now's the time. Okay, well, I want to thank you all for attending this panel on food insecurity. As a reminder, we will not be returned back to the main group. This concludes today's age-friendly conference presentation. I want to thank all of you for taking the time for being on this panel. This will not be followed up with an online evaluation. However, you will receive one via email. And if you haven't already had a chance to sign up for the last session that's being held next Tuesday, I would encourage you to do that as well. Thank you all for attending. Be well, be safe, and hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.